You can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Net Zero Day in Westminster. The question is, can we afford it? We'll join the battle to keep fighting for RAF Scampton. Yes, and that really, I think, matters hugely to our history and heritage in this country. And James Toseland will join us on Talking Pints, double World Superbike champion. What motivates somebody to do a sport as dangerous, frankly, as crazy as that? But before we get there, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thanks very much indeed, and good evening to you. The top story tonight. A man has been found guilty of the murder of a 9-year-old girl who was shot in Liverpool last year. Olivia Pratt-Corbell was murdered in her own home last August. Merseyside Police has released CCTV footage of the moment Thomas Cashman chased a convicted drug dealer towards Miss Corbell's home. Olivia was killed just moments later. He was also found guilty of the attempted murder of Joseph Nee. The King has made history by becoming the first British monarch to address the German Parliament, giving a speech in both German and English. King Charles made the invasion of Ukraine a focus of his speech, describing the war as unprovoked and telling Ukrainians he was praying for them. He also condemned what he called the unimaginable suffering caused by President Vladimir Putin. Here, the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has announced his party will freeze council tax bills this year. He unveiled the pledge at a launch of Labour's local election campaign in Swindon. The move would be funded, he said, by a windfall tax on the profits of oil and gas companies. And climate change protesters have disrupted Humza Yousaf's debut First Minister's question session as leader.
Hoping there might be another intervention from the gallery just to stop that long rant from Humza Yousaf that didn't address the question at all, because I specifically asked... Here they go. Well, the presiding officer had to clear the public gallery at Holyrood after 5 separate interruptions. Mr Yousaf said the heckling stopped the Scottish Parliament from operating. Scottish Conservative leader Douglas Ross challenged the First Minister over his choice of cabinet appointments.
Now, tonight, the White House has issued a statement saying US citizens residing in or travelling to Russia should depart immediately. That comes as an American reporter working for the Wall Street Journal has been arrested in Russia on suspicion of spying for Washington. Evan Gershkovich pleaded not guilty during his court appearance, according to state-owned media. But the court ruled Gershkovich could be held in custody until the end of May. The Health Secretary has accused the British Medical Association of adopting a political, militant stance in talks to resolve the junior doctors' pay dispute. Steve Barclay says the BMA has a precondition to negotiations of a 35% pay increase. The union denies that and urged the minister to get round the table, saying no credible offer has yet been made. Junior doctors in England will strike for 96 hours from the 11th of April. Those are your latest news headlines. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and on the TuneIn app. You're with GB News, the People's Channel. Time for Farage.
Well, today the big story is net zero. Yes, this government pressuring absolutely full steam ahead for our net zero targets. Oddly, over the course of this week, the European Union are now beginning to row back. Yes, the big German car manufacturers are beginning to have their say. Internal combustion engines will go on being made in Europe beyond 2035. And you know what? They're going to use e-fuel. I don't know much about e-fuel, but if it works, it sounds great. But not here. No, Grant Shapps, the main man when it comes to net zero, says no new motor cars after 2030 will be made with the internal combustion engine. I think this is implausible, impractical, and it simply cannot work. But Shapps is there saying, no, we're going to invest money in carbon capture, invest money in energy saving, namely take wind farms, get the energy, store it in batteries. To me, all of this is a complete and absolute pipe dream. And most significantly today, he admitted there will be no cost savings to consumers for many, many years to come, which I read as being increased costs for many, many years to come. So the question is, can we afford our net zero targets? Give me your views, Farage at gbnews.uk. Well, I've got two men joining me tonight with very different views. Bob Ward from the Grantham Policy Institute, Ross Clark, freelance journalist, you write for the Mail, the Telegraph, etc. Bob Ward, we all want a cleaner, better world to live in. We may disagree on how urgent climate change is, etc. I thought the admission today from Grant Shapps that renewable energy is expensive and will cost households more was very significant. Basically, you want to put a big heat pump on your house, you get energy, you will get a grant to do that. If you're using gas to cook, you're going to pay more. It's not very fair, is it?
Well, he didn't say that renewable energy is expensive. In fact, he said the opposite. Renewable energy is now cheaper. I mean, remember the cost of energy crisis that we're having and the cost of living crisis is because of the cost of natural gas, which has gone up massively as a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It's our dependence on fossil fuels that's causing us a problem at the moment. Renewable offshore wind is producing electricity at a far cheaper price.
Hang on a second. You're quite right. The initial invasion of Ukraine had pushed gas prices way up, but they're back down now, aren't they?
Yeah, but at the moment, the problem is that we have a system that means that the electricity price is set by the most expensive form of electricity generation that is on the grid at the moment, and at the moment that's gas. So even though wind is cheaper, we're paying a price for electricity generated by wind, which is set by gas.
And that has been a rip-off. That has been a rip-off to consumers. The fact that wind generation has been priced on gas...
But it's not the wind farms' problems, it's the regulatory system we've set up. And Grant Shapps said today it needs reform so that consumers do benefit from the fact that renewable energy is cheaper.
The wind farms could never have been built without taxpayer subsidy.
That's right. When it first started, they were more expensive than fossil fuels, and so you apply subsidies, and the prices come right down, and now it is cheaper than it is to generate electricity through gas.
Right.
So the idea that you invest in technology so that the price comes down over time, I mean, that's exactly what you want. We do that with all technology.
If it was true, I'd be over the moon.
Well, it is true.
I would be over the moon.
You should be over the moon.
I would be. I'm not convinced. Ross Clark, you are very much a sceptic about these policies. You know, Bob Ward talks there about the fact that the prices are coming down, etc. I was fascinated today by what Shapps had to say, because I got the impression that the poor will pay more for several years to come for their energy to subsidise the rich, who are going to put in heat pumps and everything else. Have I got it wrong? Was today a big transformation?
Yeah, well, it's always the way with green things. I mean, the normal rules seem to be reversed. I mean, most times we don't have regressive taxes. We have progressive taxes where you earn more, you have more wealth, you pay more tax. But when it gets to green things, all that seems to go out the window, and we pay huge subsidies to people with mansions to put in wood chip boilers and, buy, super duper electric cars and so on. And yet the poorer people, they end up paying the bills because they get late into the market after, all the subsidies, electric car subsidies have gone, they've all gone now, the purchase subsidies. By the time the ordinary people, are forced to buy electric cars, there won't be any subsidy. And it's the same with heat pumps. We're putting these huge subsidies to relatively wealthy people to fit heat pumps in their house, but those subsidies will go eventually, and by the time the poor are forced to install them in their properties, they'll be paying the full.
But Ross Clark, you are a climate change denier.
No, I'm not. I do not resile from the idea the climate is warming, and that is almost certainly to do with human carbon emissions.
You think so, yeah?
But we've got to do something about it, but that has got to be balanced against having an economy and having people to, having basic living standards. We could go carbon-free tomorrow if we wanted to. We wouldn't have an economy. We'd have people starving. We'd have people shivering.
And this is where climate realism, Bob Ward, comes in. So this week, the European Union, and I was there for many years inside their parliament, and they were the high priests of, climate change theory. This week, they've decided that actually, post-2035, internal combustion engines can still be made, because Mercedes, I think, wanted it, and the big German car industry, but they will use e-fuels. We today, with Grant Shapps, are still committed to all cars after 2030 being electric vehicles. Now, I think in Beijing, they are absolutely, cheering to the rafters because they will dominate the electric car market. Don't you think, whatever your views on CO2, and I know where you stand on all of this, don't you think the EU, I can't believe I'm saying this, don't you think the EU are showing more realism on this issue than Grant Shapps?
Well, I think the EU have caved into lobbying by vested interests. The German car manufacturers have said, we think electric vehicles are going to be, part of the main part of it, but we want to have the opportunity to build these other vehicles that are powered by e-fuels. Well, I mean, the Americans are making a bet on the electric vehicle market. They've made a massive investment in it. They're attracting businesses from the UK back to the United States because they believe in electric vehicles, and the Chinese believe in electric vehicles. So we're going to have a battle here, and the question is whether you think Chinese and American electric vehicle manufacturers are going to win out over the Europeans, and where should we be? I'm happy either way, but I just don't think that the answer is going to be that we should slow down on phasing out petrol and diesel vehicles. Remember, petrol and diesel are still expensive, and electric vehicles will be cheaper.
2030 is unrealistic.
Why is it unrealistic? Are you giving up now already because the Germans have said, oh, it's too difficult, the Brits can't beat that?
No, I'll tell you why. Because without massive taxpayer subsidy and an increased cost for ordinary folk, it can't be done.
Taxpayer subsidy. Look at the massive subsidy we're having to pay at the moment for our dependence on fossil fuels.
What subsidy?
We're having to pay people's bills because it's too... What do you mean? What we've done at the moment is the price of natural gas is so high that the government has had to introduce a cap and is paying for the increased price of natural gas. It's a massive
We should
subsidy.
be producing our own. Now,
where are you going to get it from, Nigel? Do you want to come back to fracking?
The Boland Reserve, of course.
I knew we'd come back to fracking.
Now, you see, there we are. So price is an issue. But have a look at this headline in the Times newspaper today. It really made me laugh because the Times are swallowing hook, line and sinker what the government are saying. Powering up Britain, push to build turbines and ditch gas in dash for energy security. I don't think I've ever seen anything more illogical and more moronic than that. And I'll tell you why. Because we're going to actually make people who use gas pay more money, the poor. The rich, who can get away from it, will get subsidised by it. Bob Ward, whatever you say to me, forget price for a moment, let's get on to energy security. We, in the last few weeks, fired up 2 coal-fired power stations. Such was the risk that literally the lights would go out in this country. Isn't it insane to call the Shap statement today anything to do with energy security? It's the opposite. Green energy doesn't give us secure energy. There is no means of storing energy. We need gas or coal or whatever it is to back up wind.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. We need to develop storage. We need to do better matching of supply and demand. But remember that our dependence on natural gas makes us insecure. At the moment,
why?
Half of the gas we use every year has to be imported. We are not able to get it out of the North Sea.
We could produce our own gas.
No, where are you going to get it from, Nigel?
We've got massive decades of reserves of gas in Lancashire and Cumbria.
So let's go to the right. So I suggest that the next show you go down to the people in Poole and say how confident are they that the oil industry could extract oil safely when we've just had an oil leak into Poole, and we've got now they're going to deal with the consequences of that for decades to come. It's going to affect the wildlife. It's washing up on Brownsea Island where you've got a rare red squirrel population. So it's fine if you could guarantee that it could be done safely, but what has happened is they say you cannot frack and guarantee the safety of the houses nearby.
Your attitude is let the rest of the world suffer these risks and just import energy.
No, I'm saying we have domestic clean energy is our best source of sustainable, cheap, secure energy.
What happens when the wind's not blowing?
So you do need a solution, and so what you can do is you can have storage that provides electricity storage. And I know, Nigel, that you tend to think that we'll never get beyond where we are now, but I keep mentioning to you that we've had huge developments in battery storage.
Yeah.
If you look at, for instance, the storage of batteries in mobile phones, they've improved massively. We are making huge progress. And if you bet against us ever, I'd like to take a bet with you now.
I'd love to know.
Renewables plus storage will be cheaper than fossil fuels 10 years
Ross
from
Clark,
now.
I've heard today, not just from Bob, but from Grant Shapps, energy storage and carbon capture will be major priorities. My problem is, I've been hearing this for 20 years. Is it realistic?
Well, the most interesting thing about today's announcement is this £20 billion going into carbon capture and storage development.
Yeah.
And what does that say to you? It says the government has coming round to realising that fossil fuels are going to have a future. Carbon capture and storage, it's a sort of embryonic technology, hasn't been proven on a large scale yet, but if you're going to put £20 billion on it, why would you want to do that if you weren't coming round to realise that fossil fuels are going to have to continue to be part of our energy mix? And the reason for that is because of the intermittency problem. When the wind's not blowing, the sun's not shining. At the moment, we are making up for that with gas. But by 2035, the government says it wants to do away with the gas. And what happens then? It's really expensive energy storage.
Don't you think, just as the European Union this week has shifted its targets, has eased back on its zero carbon commitments, this 2030 target, after which no internal combustion engines are going to be made, it's going to go, isn't it?
I think we are going to have to go down the same route as the EU, because no car manufacturer is going to make cars specifically for the UK market. They're going to, they want to sell them around the world now. So, if it becomes a standard product to have hybrids in future or internal combustion engines powered by e-fuel, then, Britain is going to have to allow them as well. Otherwise, British motorists would have virtually no choice.
I agree. What you get on GB News is people who disagree very strongly, but civilised, proper, open debate. It's called critical thinking. You can make your own minds up at home. In a moment, we're not allowed to use the word fat. Good Lord, no, that would offend everybody. And yet, could 50% of British fishermen lose their jobs because they're too fat? Back with you in a moment.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway, Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my common sense crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Some of your thoughts on that previous debate. Pete says, I would like a referendum on all this green future. Pete, I tell you what, most of us would like a referendum. I can't think of a subject on which Westminster is more out of touch with the public than on this whole lunacy to go for net zero, whatever the cost to ordinary people. One viewer says, we can't afford the cost of fossil fuels. Well, that's fine, whoever you are, but actually, renewables can be more expensive too. Stuart says, no, it's just a money-making machine. How much total tax in the pound does your average gullible UK working person truly pay in tax? Stuart, if we added up direct tax, indirect tax, excess tax on energy and everything else, I don't think we'd even leave the front door and go to work. Now, one of the reasons to battle for Brexit was that our island nation could get back to looking after the most valuable, renewable resource that it possesses. Now, I'm not joking, the fish within our seas. Up to 12 miles should be ours without condition, but actually, in the North Sea and elsewhere, up to 200 miles should be our own exclusive economic zone. But Boris, for all the bravado, did nothing of the sort. We now have probably more EU boats fishing up to our 6-mile line than ever before. But now, what could be a killer blow for the inshore, under 10-metre, one-man or one-woman fishing boats has hove into view. It is known as the ML5 Medical Report and Certificate. Page after page after page of what you've got to put down for your medical condition to be allowed after this November to even continue in the fishing industry. It is causing, I would say, a degree of panic. There is, I think, genuine concern. Paul Lyons is an inshore fisherman from Norfolk, an active campaigner for the fishing industry. Paul, being tricky on this, are they saying you're too fat to continue?
Well, what they're saying is, I think 50% of the fishermen that are now actively seeking a living from the sea will be overweight. That's BMI, body mass indication. That was dreamt up by a Belgian mathematician, not a physician, 200 years ago to get correlation. Now, what's happened is they're now saying that we can't get medicals. They're pushing things out like grandfather rights, and they're telling us we've all got to be all right. But the trouble of it is the minister in that building over across the waters there, he can turn around a stroke or a pen and exempt under 24-metre vessels out of this. This is a UN resolution. That's International Labour Organisation 188.
And adopted by the European Union.
Yes.
And yet, from what I can understand, apart from Spain, no other country is intending to bring it into power.
Well, no, they want it here to it, Nigel. You know exactly what happens. Our MMO don't even know how much fish is coming out of the sea and going into foreign ports at the minute, let alone what men man these and what conditions they work under. But what I'm saying is, we will be out of work because we won't get it. They assure us we'll get grandfather rights, but the same thing will occur for the next generation who do go get this.
So we've challenged the Marine and Coast Guard Agency, and they say to us, we want to reassure people that introducing medical certificates is not to prevent existing fishermen from working. We are supporting and preparing fishermen in the lead up to this requirement coming into force. We have made sure grandfather rights are in place, which considers pre-existing medical conditions. But even if your generation was grandfathered in, what about new people?
Well, the trouble of it is someone who's now 40 years old and can, in years' time, he probably won't. So what's he got to throw his business away? And the thing of it is, Nigel, is that a fella who worked on the deck of his trawler, who's fit and running around like a racing rat, when he get in that wheelhouse and he's skipper, he don't work anymore. He think, and his brain catch that fish, and he know where to go, and that's experience. He put a bit of weight on. He spread. That's called middle-aged spread. So is he then going to turn around and be pushed out of business? But what you got to remember is that boat won't go to sea because the deck crew aren't qualified to take the boat. So this has got huge implications. The minister need to really rethink what is he trying to achieve with these medicals.
And what has Brexit brought for you?
Well, we ain't had Brexit yet, have we, Nigel? That's not. That was a toy, pretend Brexit. They haven't carried it out yet because we haven't got nothing back, only a threat from Europe. In 5 years' time...
There was a press report, Paul, last week saying British fishermen are catching £100 million more fish than they were before Brexit.
Oh, yeah, but that's a lie. That's a spin. Because if that was factual, that £100 million would break down so that Britain got 46 million of that, because 54% of the available quota is owned by foreign companies that fish against our pool. So that's never the truth.
For a moment now, I'm going to pretend that I work for the Marine and Coast Guard Agency. I'm worried about Paul Lyons' health. I'm going to put the scales down here. Paul, get up there. Let's see whether you pass this or not.
112 kilo, Nigel.
Now, I mean, obviously kilos are, you know, I'd rather use pounds and ounces, but 112 kilos. How much? You're a 37 BMI. You are not fit.
Well, I'm finished.
You are not fit, but
I'm finished.
But I feel that I'm pretty, you know,
Don't be too sure, Nigel.
So let's have a go. Let's see where we get on with this. Oh, I'm fine. I'm 87.5 kilos. Our survey says... my BMI is 27.
Oh, well, you're overweight.
Which says I'm between 25 and 30. I may not be fit to join the British fishing industry. Interestingly, the entire England rugby team, some of the fittest lads you could meet in your life, not one of them would pass the current BMI test. Mark Spencer, Fisheries Minister, wake up to the fact that people like Paul make up about 50% of the inshore fishing industry. If this comes into place, they're all going to be out of work by November. Or is this linked to Grant Shapps' plan that we heard earlier towards net zero? Do they want people like Paul to be out of work to surround our beautiful seascape with wind farms? Is it actually deliberate? And I'm not being conspiratorial, but what do you...
They're not going to stop me going to work, Nigel. They'll have to handcuff me and drag me off that boat, because I tell you what, that's all I've ever done, and I'm going to carry on doing it. We've got a beach where I live being washed away. Every tide, that sea disappear. I used to fish off that beach. That ain't there no more. They sit there watching that happen. They don't care. Someone has got to get a bullet up their bums and wake them up and get them to consider that this country isn't made out of people who live inside the M24 corridor. As they learnt with the referendum, that was the rural areas and the people outside that make this country great. And I tell you what, no one is listening and no one is caring about what we put up with. Coastal communities were thrown under a bus and forgot about. All these 170 MPs that voted for that stupid fisheries deal that threatened, in 5 years' time, we don't get our fish back and our waters back. We can't have a European an exclusive zone, because they threatened us with transport, they threatened us with energy, they threatened us with aeroplanes.
Brexit needs to be completed properly. And folks at home, you're watching this, listening to this, Paul Lyons here.
That make me boil, I think.
Paul Lyons here, passionate, he means it, and we as a channel are right behind people like Paul Lyons. We'll take a break.
And all you fishermen, don't get medicals done.
What?
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive.
With the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know,
All
Kate
sorts
Moss?
of rooms. Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I have walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island's story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
I can't even begin to tell you how disgusted I am by what Scampton is going to become. The idea that a massive investment, the idea that where Guy Gibson and those guys from 617 went out on Madame Buster's raid and elsewhere is not going to become an important heritage centre, and even that the Red Arrows, and Scampton was the home of the Red Arrows, may not be able to continue to fly over that base. I am absolutely furious. I was left yesterday with a sinking feeling that maybe the campaign to save RAF Scampton was over. There's a petition out there on change.org. It's got 50,000 signatures. I've helped to push it. I've done what I can. I went to Scampton last week. I care about this. I thought maybe it was all over. But I'm pleased to say that Sarah Carter is continuing the campaign. She's running Save Our Scampton. She joins me down the line right now from Scampton in Lincolnshire. Sarah, welcome to the programme, but tell me, please, realistically, what now can be done?
Oh, anything and everything that we can do will be done. We have West Lindsey District Council trying to put an injunction in, and we are reaching out to anyone and everyone that will listen. And if they don't, we're making them listen. That, you know, this regeneration, £300 million project has got to go ahead. You know, there's no other situation that we will rest at, basically.
No, and listen, I get your passion. I understand. I mean, I was there last Monday, as you know. I'm a huge believer in the project. But how do you get government to change their mind?
Well, I don't know. I've got a great team working with me from Linton-on-Ouse that went through the same thing last year. They're also helping the council, the same legal team helping the council. So they're sort of trying to guide us in the right way. So we've got a meeting hopefully that's planned soon, and there's a lot of us that are getting together to try and sort of do a sort of three-pronged attack on them, because we don't believe that they realise exactly the situation up here and what they're potentially putting us through, and sort of the devastation it will cause if we don't get this 300 million investment. And everyone's sitting down in London in their offices, and they need to get up here. And so we've invited them up here to actually come and see for themselves the situation.
What can my viewers and listeners and people following online and on the app, what can we do to help you?
Oh. Well, I mean, the support that we've had so far, I wake up in the morning to like 30, 40 messages on Facebook Messenger. The support out there from sort of people locally and further afield that have got that interest in military history have been signing the open letter, which is going to the Home Office. And also we're going to take the petition down to the Home Office as well. And we're just going to keep on at them until they actually come and see sort of what the situation is. And, you know, I'm sure there's other things out there that we haven't thought of, but we are going to do absolutely everything and anything. We're working with Scampton Holdings as well. You know, they support us, we support them, and with the West Lindsey District Council, we hope that between us we can fight this.
Sarah Carter, I wish you well. Maybe I'll come back to Scampton and do another programme there. I want this to work. Invited. There's the petition on change. No, I'm going to come. Don't worry. Keep campaigning. If you give up, they win. Thank you very much indeed. Now, an extraordinary What the Farage moment. A member of the Welsh Parliament, the Senedd, Jenny Rathbone. Gosh, she's really top drawer. This is what she had to say.
Has many items broadcasting disinformation or hateful views, and it's currently broadcast through Senedd TV on our internal televisions. So I just wondered if any thought had been given to whether it was appropriate for an organisation that might continue to disseminate disinformation to be broadcast through our systems to our staff and members.
God help us. There she is, a member of the Labour Party, a member of the Welsh Parliament, doesn't like GB News, thinks it should be banned. Next week, I'm going to tell you all about the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I'm going to tell you why, through the Financial Times and the BBC, it will be attacked as the next few months go by. But for now, we'll leave that and we'll look forward to James Toseland, because he is a double world superbike champion from Doncaster. He's going to join me in just a moment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Talking Pints. I'm joined by James Toseland, former double world Superbike champion, and a lad from Doncaster, and welcome to the programme.
Cheers, Nigel. Oh,
cheers.
Is that for your birthday on Monday? Happy birthday, by the way. Is it? Is it next week, I bet?
Everyone knows. Everyone knows I can't keep my birthday or my age a secret. James, we were up in Doncaster the other week, did a live programme up there, and you're very much a Doncaster boy, aren't you?
Yeah, born in Doncaster. I've lived most of my life in Sheffield area, but I've been a patron for the Sheffield Children's Hospital there, so I've got more affiliation with Sheffield itself. But yeah, born and bred in Doncaster.
Now, Superbikes, it kind of feels like a very sort of privileged elite get the chance to do this.
It is. I mean, I was very privileged to have a job that went from a hobby to a career itself, and it's flying around a motorcycle track at 200 miles an hour every weekend, and travelling the world as well, which you know you've done yourself, and to get out of Doncaster and see the world and the different cultures and different people and different foods and different smells and climates. If I can encourage anybody to do anything, it's travel the world and feel these different things.
Not everyone gets that chance. You were twice world champion in this. In what has got to be, I guess, I mean, is there a more dangerous sport?
Oh, crikey. It's up there. I mean, the Isle of Man TT racing, which is obviously...
Was it last year? Over half a dozen killed doing it.
It's most years there's some fatalities, unfortunately, but it's, you know, that if you're an adrenaline junkie, the closer to death you are, the more alive you feel.
So is that what you are?
Yeah, yeah. And the closer to death you are, the more exciting it is, and that's the drug, and that's what we get addicted to. And flying around on motorcycles at those speeds, especially if you are lucky enough to witness the Isle of Man TT, it's such an incredible spectacle, and the bravery of those guys and the risks that they take. You've got to understand why people risk to that level. Especially when they've got families.
Why have you, over the years, risked to that level? What's been your motivation to do this incredibly dangerous thing?
It's a difficult one to describe. I think if you are on a machine and you go 200 miles an hour and you go 210 miles an hour and you want to go faster than that and you can't get enough of it, you need to tick a certain way. And there's not many of us, I don't think, luckily, in the world.
So where did it come from with you?
Don't know. I've always been naturally competitive, so obviously being in sport was perfect. And to be naturally competitive and an adrenaline junkie, to be able to win something and go at those speeds every single weekend, it just scratched that itch that I naturally had, and it was perfect for me, perfect for a lot of people. But yeah, there isn't. Honestly, I've done the skydiving. I was abseiling down a building in Sheffield like last week.
You're completely, I mean, in the nicest way of putting it, a bit of a nutter, really, aren't you?
Yeah, but honestly, abseiling or skydiving, it doesn't come close to flying around on a motorcycle. And we were talking earlier about the e-fuels on the climate.
Because this big debate, you know, the internal combustion engine, and the Germans have clearly convinced the European Union not to end the manufacture of them. Do e-fuels actually work?
Yeah, they do work, and they've been tested. And basically, it keeps the combustion engine alive, and especially with motorcycling as well, it keeps the noise, because a massive part of our show is the roar. If you've watched an electric bike race, it is not the same, or Formula E, for example, compared to Formula 1. And if you heard a V12 or a V10 Formula 1 car going around the track compared to what it is now with the hybrids, it is just not the same show. So we're pushing for these e-fuels, because if we can run the combustion engine, keep the noise, but not burn off and kick out the CO2s, it's perfect for our industry.
Well, this is where the European Union now are. I never thought I'd be pro the European Union, but on this decision they are. Over there, they're not listening at the moment, but maybe they will. James, what was the worst injury you had doing this?
The one that retired me, which I had to have my right wrist fused, which it doesn't move anymore. So, because with the throttle of the motorcycle, that was my worst one.
I'm thinking back to the 70s, Barry Sheen, almost reconstructed once or twice.
Yeah.
Every year.
Yeah, and unfortunately, esophagus cancer got the better of him in the end with Barry. But with Barry's in the 70s, especially, I mean, his leather suit was thicker than this, thinner than this. The suit, so the protective gear and everything's moved on. But yeah, with the e-fuel thing, it's really interesting, because if we can kind of keep the noise, especially with the combustion engines.
I would honestly, if this can work, I'd be over the moon. I think this move to electric vehicles is impractical. I don't think we've got the electricity. What would you say, James, what would you say to 16, 17, 18-year-olds that want to get a motorbike? Do you think Britain's roads work for motorbikes?
Oh, crikey. I mean, not so much the roads, it's the climate that doesn't necessarily lend itself to, 6 months of the year. You'd rather not be on a motorcycle with the weather, So it's more the weather rather than the roads. The roads, actually, if you've travelled, our roads are pretty good. The standard of them and how good they are compared to in Europe and around the world, our road networks are very. I mean, we have a lot of restrictions now with road humps and speed cameras and that, which make it a little bit trickier.
And on the embankment there, 20 miles an hour, 24 hours a day. It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, but we have some of the best motorcycle racetracks in the world on this little island. Silverstone, Donington, Brands Hatch, Cadwell Park, Alton Park. We have a plethora of circuits that you can buy a little track bike and go and have a good razz round, and you don't need to get the buzz on the roads that you can on the racetrack anyway. But
and winning the World Championship twice, did you make any money out of this?
Yeah. It was very lucrative, at the top. But with most sport, the money, the big money,
you've got to be right there, haven't you?
It is. Anything less than fifth, I mean, obviously, I moved into the music industry as well from racing, and the music and the travelling and the touring compared to the sport. It's not just the money that's different. Just the way of life from being a sportsman to a musician.
Tell us about the music.
It's well, I mean, I was wanting to use this platform to obviously, being an advocate of a Brexit thing. The music industry, as you know, it's been a disaster for it. With all the carnets, with all the travelling, 90 nights and 180 days of the year, you're not allowed to stay in Europe, etc., etc., etc. When we support Deep Purple and one of the biggest bands in the world, and we got a certain fee. And when actually now you need a carnet for every single European country to go and play, and don't even meet that you're doing it, it's a huge...
But as Roger Daltrey said, we were touring Europe and doing concerts and doing gigs way before we joined the common market.
Yeah.
So what's going on?
It's the restrictions that have been imposed. Spain has not done the same restrictions. You can move around as an artist.
It's bloody mindedness, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's like talking to yourself on wanting a particular Brexit that worked for us. And in the music industry, how do you think, as an answer to all the musicians out there, that I was wanting to ask you particularly, because you wanted a Brexit and
well, I wanted to be a free country.
Yeah. And how do we get around other countries not wanting to have our rules on what we'd like to do from this deal that we've kind of succumbed to?
I think the answer is, James, the deal's blooming rubbish. The guest before you, Paul, fisherman from Great Yarmouth, has seen almost no benefit, and yet potentially he could have done. I think we're getting bloody mindedness back from Europe. I think Daltrey's point that we've always, had musicians go back and forth. I think we can sort all this out, but I worry that our government doesn't quite have the resolve.
So it's our government that can't negotiate or doesn't want to negotiate these things on making it possible for artists. Could an artist say in this country, is it possible for our government to put a legislation in that all artists, performing artists that are travelling all around Europe, have a free rein at travelling round?
We would need cooperation from other European countries, but as you say, Spain already is in that place. It just needs determination and belief. And I think Brexit came across this place here as a heck of a shock. They haven't quite adjusted to it yet. They will in time, because we're not going back.
Yeah, I'm just worried there's going to be a lot of artists that are going to kind of really suffer in this little period, that we're going to lose a generation of being able to tour.
But there is a big world outside Europe too.
Yes, but it's more expensive to go beyond that as well for an artist.
There's a big world out there.
Yeah.
By the way, are you making more money in in music than you made in motorsport?
Hell no. But it's it's not about the money, is it? As well, it's I mean, if you can do something.
Which do you prefer?
I prefer the racing to scratch the itch of needing to have something to take that.
James Toseland, adrenaline junkie.
Yes, I'll drink to that.
Thank you for joining me on Talking Bites. OK, we have got a couple of barrage. The Farage is. Adrian asks me, should Donald Trump accept the 2020 presidential election result. Trump was furious about the result, furious about tens of millions of mail-out ballots going out round the country, as indeed I have been over postal voting. I mean, what happened in 2019 in the Peterborough by-election, where a guy who was a previously convicted fraudster turned up with a Tesco's bag with 1,000 votes for the Labour Party, and the Brexit Party candidate lost by 600 votes. I think postal voting is always open to corruption. But I felt all the way through that the Trump message of the stolen election was too negative. Far better to talk about electoral reform. And I do think, actually, the Republicans are beginning to do that. Thank goodness. People do not want a constant diet of negativity. They want to see the sunlit uplands that we can get to. Time for one more. Angie asks me, how would you have led the country during the pandemic? Angie, let me tell you something. There would have been one lockdown, and after that, there'd have been no more lockdowns. I could be flippant and say it would have been party time. It wouldn't quite have been party time, but I think we're beginning to learn that long-term, the cost of lockdown, economically, socially, medically, psychologically, it'll turn out to be the biggest mistake any British government ever made. And we didn't need to do it. Florida did different, Sweden did different, with far better outcomes. But that's enough from me. Jacob Rees-Mogg, what do we have this evening?
What do we have? Well, there's an excellent report from Policy Exchange on how gender issues are taught at schools and how schools don't tell parents what they're teaching.
Yeah.
And they cover it up from parents, and it seems to be a real scandal. So we're going to be discussing that, and we're also going to be discussing the failures of the Bank of England with Roger Bootle.
Well, Roger, great man. Bank of England, absolutely hopeless under Andrew out to lunch Bailey. Jacob, the family, why has the Conservative Party not been defending the family?
I don't understand it. The family is the core of our society, and the state always wants to put the family second because that's how the state controls. And the family is the big bastion against state control.
Says a father of 6 children. I'm done for now. Back with you next Monday. Now the weather.
Hello there. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office. I'm Jonathan Vautry. There's certainly going to be a contrast in wind strengths as we move throughout Thursday night. The isobars are going to be spacing their way out across parts of Scotland and certainly the northern half of the UK, bringing fairly light winds. However, we are tracking this low pressure centre that's going to be pushing into southern areas, and the squeeze in the isobars here is going to bring gales, certainly across coastal areas, severe for a time, potential for up to 60-70 mile an hour gusts. And so there is a wind warning in force, and do take care if you are travelling out here. Rain pushing its way in across many southern areas, but it will stay drier across the north, and that's where we see those clearer spells, and that will allow temperatures to drop down a bit more into mid-single figures. But underneath the cloud will be a fairly mild night and a fairly mild start to Friday. It is, though, going to be, again, another windy one and a wet one. Another rain warning in force, particularly across parts of Devon and Cornwall, where we could see some of that rain really persist throughout the day. And it, for many of us, will be a fairly grey day on the whole. Particularly across eastern areas where we see a cool breeze feeding in from the North Sea and the cloud being particularly persistent. Some areas may not see higher than 8-9 degrees or so. But western areas of Scotland probably seeing the best of the brightness throughout the day. Into the evening, we've got to watch this trailing occluded front that's going to be stalling across parts of southwest England into Wales and through Northern Ireland, and really that's going to be with you as you wake up on Saturday morning as well to provide a fairly damp start to the day here. But again, it's going to be another cloudy one for a lot of us. Western Scotland still holding on to a bit of that sunshine, but less so than we saw on Friday. Some drizzle pushing into far eastern coasts of Scotland and England as well throughout the day. That unsettled theme looks like it will abate a bit thanks to high pressure that's going to be pushing its way in for Sunday, but we do just, again, have to watch out for further fronts that want to start pushing its way in as we move into the new working week. But for now, though, Sunday certainly looking like the better day of the weekend. Bye-bye.
It's all about family.